Okay, and it is 6 o'clock.
Are we live now, Kingston?
We are live.
All right. All right, folks, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us this evening for some wildfire preparedness information. My name is Nate Armstrong. I'm the Deputy Chief for CAL FIRE that oversees the wildland firefighting mission in both San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties. You won't be stuck with me all night. I'm just going to be hosting this evening's discussion, and then we'll help facilitate questions and answers with any time that we have remaining after the presentation. So we do have from now until 7:30 put aside this evening for this. So anytime left after that presentation, we'll try to cover as many questions as we can. Regarding that questions and answers session, so during the presentation, you can type your question in using the Q&A function on the very bottom, but nothing will actually get answered until the very end of the presentation. So sometimes people will ask like, hey, what did you mean by that? That's not going to get answered in that moment. So if you do have a specific question, you'll need to kind of outline what you're asking about. Also, on the topic, this discussion is about wildfire preparedness, and we want to respect the time of the people that showed up this evening seeking information on preparedness. So we're going to focus our efforts during that question and answer session, answering questions about preparedness and how you can be ready and safe. So before we get going this evening, I'd like to just do a very brief introduction of our evening's presenters, and then I'll give just a little bit more info, and then we'll finally get going. So starting off this evening will be Marco Mack. If you can give a wave, Mr. Mack, there you go. So Mr. Mack is on the executive board for the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County, and will be providing information on defensible space. After Mr. Mack will be Ed Hayes. Ed, if you can give a little wave. Beautiful, thank you. Mr. Hayes is the Vice President of the South Skyline Fire Safe Council and also a board member of the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County. And he's going to be discussing steps to harden your home. And then batting in the number 3 spot this evening is John DeLong. John, if you can get, there we go, there's John. So Mr. DeLong is also a member of the board for the South Skyline Fire Safe Council, and he'll be going over steps that you can take to be ready to evacuate should you receive that notification. Before I turn the floor over to these gentlemen, I did want to take just a brief moment to clear up some confusion that we seem to get recurring questions about out of the series of virtual meetings and webinars that we've been conducting. And if you tuned into our recent Ready, Set, Go presentation a couple of weeks ago, this is the same exact disclaimer I gave then. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the San Mateo Santa Cruz unit of CAL FIRE encompasses both San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties. And while those geographical locations may be different, our mission is the same in both of those counties, and much of our staff reaches across those counties. So while we market information in specific areas sometimes, some of that information reaches across those lines, and so people have got different presentations, and I just wanted to clear up a couple of those things, and I'll share my screen with you really quick. And y'all should hopefully be looking at a basically a PowerPoint slide right now that says CAL FIRE San Mateo Santa Cruz webinars. And I just want to detail out a little bit of this just to make sure nobody thinks they've been missing anything. So it all started on March 15th and 16th in Santa Cruz County. You're kind of focused on Santa Cruz County. We did a couple of evening presentations on the CZU August lightning fire summary and lessons learned. And then in San Mateo on April 6th, we hosted a Ready, Set, Go webinar. A couple weeks later in San Mateo on April 20th, we hosted a home hardening and defensible space webinar. And then 1 week later, we hosted a webinar on the CZU August lightning fire summary and lessons learned. So that was the same presentation that we had given those couple of evenings in Santa Cruz County. They may have been tailored slightly to some San Mateo residents to give them a little bit more specifics on how things affect, but 90+% of the information was the same. Just 2 weeks ago here in Santa Cruz County, we did a Ready, Set, Go webinar. That was the same exact webinar as that one that we did on April 6th in San Mateo. And then tonight, our home hardening defensible space, although we added an extra presenter, is the same presentation as we gave on April 20th in San Mateo. So I did just want to clear up because some people have been like, hey, we missed that in this county, and why are you doing that in this county but not the other? We've done it. We've tried to cover everything for all our constituents. But if you missed any of them, you can find them all. They've all been recorded, and you can find them on our Facebook channel or our YouTube channel by searching CAL FIRE CZU. And then same as this presentation, this evening is being streamed live on Facebook on our channel, as well as some of you may even be joining us on channel 25 in Santa Cruz County on the local TV. So that is it for me. I'm going to stop sharing here real quick, and I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter of the evening, Mr. Marco Mack.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Marco Mack. I'm the Deputy Fire Marshal for Central Fire, and Central Fire includes area that's CAL FIRE and SRA, and we do some of the enforcement there and share some of that responsibility for defensible space requirements in my district, but these things apply to everybody. So what I wanted to start off with was understanding wildfire risk to structures. And one of the things that we found out in the last year, changing our way we're communicating with some of our residents, is that some of the requirements that we have include strategies, and sharing those strategies with the people has been very helpful for residents to understand what they're trying to do. And then if they're contracting the work out, that their contractor is doing the kind of work that they're is really going to be helpful to them. So what we're going to be talking about in my portion of this is understanding wildfire behavior and fire intensity and flame length. Flame length is one way of measuring fire intensity, and how wildfire would attack your structure. There's 4 different ways we'll talk about, and then show you an example of extreme fire, wind-driven fire. And wind-driven fire is usually associated with all of the large home loss fires that you hear about on the news or that you see. And then we'll talk about tree torching and ember cast and how to prevent that type of intense fire. And then get into the basic defensible space for structures, and then some of the strategies behind that. And out of that, the whole idea is that we're trying to reduce fire intensity as fire gets closer to your house. And so let me go to the next. So what we have for wildfire, basic idea of fire is that you have to have a fuel, you have oxygen, you have heat, and then the result of that would be fire. And then the intensity of fire can be increased by the type of fuel, the weather, and the topography, so like the slope. And then we look at flame length and ember casting as some of the extreme lengths. So the picture that you see there, where there's an arrow off to the side, you see the flame and the thermal column is going off to the right. And in that, that's happening because the wind is blowing. So when something burns, it has to preheat, and it actually has to turn to gas, then it's the gas that burns. So when you have a 2x4 in your fireplace and you go to burn it, you would put some kindling, you kind of warm it up, you'd get it hot enough so then it's releasing gas from the wood, and it's that gas that's burning. So fire intensity and the opportunity for more intense wildfire would be light fuels that can burn very easily. It's easy to heat them up and they burn rapidly, so grasses. If you have a slope, you would end up with the thermal column and the wind blowing and preheating the grasses and other materials next to it. You're going to end up with much more intense fire. And so our interest is, how can we reduce fire intensity, and is your house ignitable? With those two things, reducing fire intensity is pretty much by thinning out the fuel, separating it, so that way it's not adjacent to something that could easily burn and heat, and you'd end up with fire that's advancing towards your house with more and more rapid speed. And if your house is ignitable, you need to do more work to make sure that you separate the fuels from your house. And so there's 4 ways that fire can attack your house. You can have direct flame contact. You've got in that little picture to the left, you have flame adjacent to your house. One of the ways of mitigating that would be having a non-combustible area around your house, particularly if your house is ignitable. And the codes are changing. And over the next couple of years, we're going to be enforcing something called an ember resistant zone around your house. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that. So we got direct flame contact, then you have radiation. So if you had a very intense fire and very long flame length, these flame lengths are probably 80-foot, 100-foot tall flames, very intense radiant heat coming out of that. So the preheating that's happening from that type of a fire, it's preheating the fuel next to it, and you'd end up with a fire burning tree to tree. And that's a little bit different than tree torching. Tree torching would be, I've got a fire underneath, it heats up the tree, the thermal column goes up into the tree, and where that thermal column passed the branches of the tree, you'd end up with that part of the tree burning. So that's flat tree torching, and this is a full-on conflagration where you've got the crown fire. It's the top part of the trees are burning from tree to tree, and that's because of the preheating. So the area that we're seeing most fire damage coming from and losing houses is because of these number 3 and 4, the different ways that embers would end up flying at your house. So on the top picture there, you've got a fire, it's creating a thermal column, it's lifting burning vegetation into the thermal column. The column is hot, so that way it's allowing the material to keep burning. And then you'd end up with embers coming and landing on something that's flammable. So if embers land on concrete, nothing's going to happen. The little ember is going to burn out. But if it lands on a receptive fuel bed, that's when it's part of our terminology, you would end up with an opportunity that that ember could end up igniting something. So if it landed on something that was difficult to heat and burn, chances are that ember would burn out. If it landed in light grasses that are dead and dying, that's an area that is not ember resistant. That type of material would ignite, and you'd end up with a spot fire happening and spreading. So if you've got a home with well landscaped, nice green material, there is very little dead vegetation in the area 30 feet from your house, and the ember lands there, there's not much chance that it will actually ignite something. If your house is concrete, stucco, non-combustible, or painted very nicely, and you have very little, no cracks or locations where an ember can get wedged, hits the house and bounces off, and nothing to burn around the house. In fact, one of the areas that we're going to be addressing would be embers that would hit the house and bounce down and along the base of the house, no combustible mulch. We don't want to have combustible mulch within 5 feet of the house, because then you'd end up with those embers landing there and you'd have flaming fire adjacent to your house. So the horizontal ember attack, that one, item number 4, that's typically happening with wind driven, usually on a slope, and you have that thermal column is kind of following the slope and the wind is pushing it. And those are the kind of fires that you'd see 20, 30, 40-foot flame lengths and coming up out of a canyon and burning into a house. You can kind of see where that arrow comes to the house. You actually have a thermal column potentially coming up into the side of the house and getting trapped under the eaves or underneath a deck. So tree torching. So embers need a receptive fuel bed. So when the embers come and land and they're burning and they've hit something that's a receptive fuel bed, like flashy fuels as an example, you'd end up with a spot fire. So in the picture I have on the left, you have got a tree that's torching. You have a thermal column that's going up, and then you'd have a wind that's kind of taking those embers and blowing them further downwind. And what this picture identifies is there's an area that those embers fly downwind and they've already burnt out. They're not burning any longer when they hit the ground. But if it does continue to burn and it hits the ground and it hits a receptive fuel bed, you'd end up with a fire underneath another tree. And if there's no there are ladder fuels there, you'd end up with fire burning up into the tree. So one of the things that that we saw on January 19th in the Freedom Fire, we saw half-mile spotting. We had a grove of 140 juvenile eucalypt or juvenile redwood trees that torched, and you ended up with downwind spotting 1.5 miles, and it started burning up into 3 more redwood trees. And we're very fortunate with that fire that the firefighters were in place and able to prevent those spot fires from extending. So very critical. And what of trying to prevent trees from torching, the biggest thing you need to do is remove all the ladder fuels, at least 6 foot from the ground. So a surface fire can't easily get up into the trees. So wind is associated with all of this. Here's an example of a fire that I thought was a good example of same thing would happen if you had an ember that landed in front of this gentleman. He's got a patch there that of reeds that are dried out, and that area is probably 4 foot by 6 foot. And I would expect that this guy's probably lit this off every year, but today he did it on a day that's very windy. But if you look at the background, look how lush and green everything is. And this is a wind-driven fire. And this is a 60-second video that's going to start from as if an ember landed there, and you would see the fire take off. And then you'll end up seeing in 60 seconds, 10 to 12 foot flames coming off of this. So started the video here, the flames start to take off, and look where the thermal column goes. You can see the reeds kind of moving around, and the flames are going to the left. The flames are preheating the material to the left side, and more starting to burn faster and longer flame lengths. And that wind is getting pushed to the left. So look through the thermal column, and you'll end up seeing that it's going into the bushes next to it. They have evergreens next door. And those evergreens, you can start to see white coming off of it. And that white is vapor. It's actually pushing out the moisture. So if you have evergreens and you open them up, you'll see that there's usually dead vegetation inside. So the inside of that evergreen is easy to burn. You can see the fire starting to take off. You see some dark smoke coming off of it. Dark smoke is actually unburned particles. So you end up seeing that the flames are leaping up into that dark smoke. So this is an example of 60 seconds that you end up with 10, 12 foot torching. So imagine if you had a fire downwind from you, those embers were flying towards your house, landing in your yard, and it finds a receptive fuel bed. It ignites, it extends to something else. And if you had evergreens all the way up to the edge of your house, you could end up with torching all the way into the eaves of your house. Very, very scary situation. So wind-driven fires, very scary. You need to make sure that your home is protected from that. And then it's the wind-driven fires when we start losing a lot of homes. So here's an idea of ladder fuels. In this situation, this is pictures from the CZU lightning complex fire. And this was a redwood tree that torched. And there, you can see the fuels should have been trimmed 6 feet from the ground. And that area where I've got a circle, the dotted circle and up into the tree, that was an area where they were taking cut limbs and they were kind of piling it under the tree. It ended up igniting and the tree torched. So a better picture of that would be on the left, there's an area of a round white circle. That's where the tree was. And then yellow was the area where embers flew. And in the picture on the right, you can kind of see that tree is about 100, 125 foot tall. When that tree torched, you probably had 150 foot flames. And it sent off embers flying down and around, and the building next to it, it caught the vegetation on fire around it. And that building also had a wood deck. So embers flew and landed, and embers were what burnt this structure down. And you can see the area between where the fire was. You had brown grass. The fire didn't stretch across the ground and get there. It was embers that landed and flew across. This fire, you can see on the right that you had the boughs from the tree hanging down very low, and the ladder fuels weren't taken care of. So tree torching is very intense fire, and this fire intensity could have been prevented if they had limbed up all their ladder fuels, at least 6 foot. If you have vegetation and bushes underneath it, you might want to go even further than 6 foot. So one last picture on this. This is the area where they had stored all of the cut branches, and you can see an area where they had low intensity fire burn on the surface. It was able to get up into the trees, and you ended up with that torching. And I'm sure that sent embers probably hundreds of feet, half-mile downwind from there. So to protect your house, what we're looking at doing is defensible space. We're adding a new zone. So in the past, we've always talked about out to 30 feet and then extending out to 100 feet. And we require different levels of work to be done in those different zones. So in the zone closest to this house, This is labeled non-combustible zone. And that's what I believe you need to do is if your house is ignitable, it really needs to be non-combustible within 5 feet. The codes are changing, and over the next couple of years, we're going to start requiring what's called an ember resistant zone. And what that would be is that it's clean, lean. If you have vegetation there, it's watered, you have no dead or dying material. So that way, if an ember landed in there, it would be very difficult for it to ignite. So the key to this would be if you have combustible mulch, you can't have that within 5 feet of your house. So over the next year or two, you need to start engaging what's around your house. And there's a lot of people that I know that have evergreen around their house. And if that evergreen is nice and highly maintained and landscaped and there is no dead or dying material in it, you have an ember resistant zone. I've seen a lot of people change what they even think of that 5 foot area around your house of hedges. Maybe over the next few years, we make our house more fire adapted and we remove those hedges and keep the vegetation further away from your house, particularly if your house is ignitable. So the different zones. So we're going to be calling the current zone 1 is to 30 feet, zone 2 to 100 feet. So we're going to create a zone 0 in the future. And that 0 to 5 feet from a structure is going to be ember resistant. And then the area out 30 feet from your house is we don't want to have any continuous fuel. So if something should ignite, it's not connected. It's like the fire break between different parts of your yard. So that way, something that might be ignitable is separated from other material. One of the things that you're really looking at would be, I've seen this many times, boxwood hedges, where you end up, you open up inside, you can kind of see that it has a lot of dead material or duff underneath it. You could end up with hedges catching fire and there's burning material and they burn closer and closer like a wick. They get closer to the house. So the area that's more than 30 feet from your house, thinning and separating. So we talked about fuel intensity, fire intensity. So if a bush or tree should catch fire, it's separate and far enough from another that it can't just easily ignite and extend to the next tree or bush. And that way, if something burns, it burns itself out. With zone number 3, there's some areas, there's portions of Southern California within their municipal code that they require out to 170-foot defensible space and fuel modifications. So if you're on a slope and you have dead and dying vegetation, you live in a rural area where you don't have a nice landscaped area, you might have to go further out on your property to prevent fire from building up intensity as it gets closer to your house. With these requirements, we can only require that you do defensible space work up to the end of your property. So more idea of reducing fire intensity on the left. If you have a slope and you have bushes and things that are growing and they're healthy and those roots are helping to maintain the slope, one strategy would be that you thin it out. So that way you'd clear out the duff underneath and then you'd kind of trim it and prune it and do some good landscaping where the bush on the bottom is still going to help maintain slope stability. But a surface fire might get to that and burn, and that's not going to be close to something else, and it's not going to burn with as much intensity. Remember what fire does it has to preheat the material next to it. So the picture on the bottom, much less intensity coming off of that than the bushes up above. So on the top right, break the fuel continuity. So from 30 foot to 100 foot out from your house, we want the ladder fuels removed, and look strategically at the different surface fuels and starting to put separation between those. And then that way, if one of those bushes on the bottom right corner should catch fire along the surface, not enough energy to get up into the trees, not enough energy to easily burn to the bush next to it. So the picture on the above that, where you end up with the surface fuel, you might not even be able to walk through that area. Look at the flame length. One bush catches fire, it's immediately into the next bush. You're going to end up with 10, 20-foot surface flames. With a lower picture, there's not enough fuel there. You've separated it. You've reduced the fuel loading. If you live in an area that you're on a slope and you have a lot of trees and you're concerned about fire getting up into the trees and the bushes, this is a strategy where as you get closer to the house, you would look at separating the crowns of the trees further and further apart. And this would be an area where if you're on a slope and you have to have vegetation underneath the trees and you've got separation between the trees, that this is a strategy of doing that separation. So a crown fire or high intensity fire torching into one tree can't easily extend flame length into the tree next to it. So we also have standards that this is a little bit more complex, where we, depending on your slope, we require more and more distance and separation. And one of the things that we are trying to do is we're working with the California Landscape Contractors Association to try and give this information to them. So that way, when they come to your house, if you're using a landscaper and you're designing a new landscape, that they actually incorporate some fire safe components into what they do and how they design your defensible space. So this kind of wraps up my portion of the presentation. So we talked about how a fire burns, and we talked about the intensity of fire and some strategies of trying to reduce the fire intensity. And what I believe is that if you do these things, follow some of these strategies, that you can save your house can save itself from a, I'm actually changing this to a low intensity fire. That makes much more sense. And particularly if you have embers flying at your house, you should be able to protect your house and your yard from embers landing, not be able to find a receptive fuel bed. And to prevent high intensity fire, separate those surface fuels from the trees and large bushes by removing some of the ladder fuels. Then we talked about thinning and separating, breaking the fuel continuity, and look at that area 5 foot from your house. When you see those pictures of homes that survived and every other home around it had burned out, and you look at the 5 foot area around the home, so two factors. One is the home isn't easily ignitable and it's not combustible. And then they've got a nice, at least 5 foot area that's clear. So if your home is ignition resistant, you can survive an ember attack. So that's the end of my portion of this, and we're going to be moving on to the next. So I am going to stop sharing.
Guess I better unmute so everybody can hear what I'm saying. And let me get into the next portion, which is.
So we can see your screen and you're looking at.
Wait a second. You can see it, I can't. Oh dear. Okay, sorry folks.
So we can see the desktop part of your screen. We don't. You might need to choose PowerPoint.
Yep, sorry. It should come up in a second here. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties seem to be a factor here. I'm Ed Hayes, and I've been with the South Skyline Fire Safe Council for 10 years now, and we handle the area up along Skyline Boulevard primarily, and then reach down into areas in San Mateo and down into the Waterman Gap area. About 3 years ago, I got involved with the founding the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County. The county did not have a Fire Safe Council, and the Board of Supervisors allocated some money and got us started. We've been in business now for three years, and now our main mission is to educate the general public in Santa Cruz County on fire preparedness. So let's start off where Marco just left off, and one of the things that what he has been touting here is that the best way to save your house is to reduce the intensity of that fire coming towards your house. And so if you've done first your defensible space, now what you have to do is worry about how to keep your house from igniting, and what are the things that are going to affect the ignition of your home. And it doesn't mean you need to build a whole new home, but what it means is you have to take certain steps that will help your home survive the wildland fires. So we talked about defensible space, and you don't necessarily think that you have to spend a lot of money here. One of the biggest things that we're going to be worrying about is, as Marco said, is the embers that are going to be blown to your house. If you've done kept the intensity down, it's preheating your house, so to speak, then what you're going to worry about is a couple of primary areas where you have exposure. And, so we've set priorities on the house, and we'll take a look at each one of these. So looking at
Ed? Hey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ed, but your screen sharing doesn't seem to be where it seems to be a little hung up. Do you think you could stop the screen sharing and then try to reshare again? It looked like it got hung up trying to open your PowerPoint.
Let's do it again.
Now you're looking golden.
How's that?
Looking good, Ed. Sorry to interrupt, sir.
Well, I'm glad you caught it. How's that? Look a lot better? So just as one of the pictures depicted in the attack of the fire, what is the number one priority on your house? And it has to be the roof. You saw that embers are going to be cast, and where are they going to? They're going to be cast in the air, and they're going to land on your roof. And so there's some key areas on the roof that you need to be very diligent about protecting. And the number one thing of the roof is the roof system itself. Since 2008, all new construction has required a Class A non-combustible roof system. That primarily means that the roof covering, whether it's asphalt, shingle, metal roof, tile, or concrete tile, has to be non-combustible. The Class A part of it is really a system description. And it's important that you check the building codes in each of your local areas to see what those exact requirements are, because the asphalt shingle or the metal roof or the concrete tile itself is only one part of the system. And how they do that, how they classify it as a roof system, is they test it. And so each manufacturer of a material must go through a UAL testing procedure where they test to make sure that the system will withstand at least a 1 hour fire on the roof. So very important aspect. Probably the first thing you need to check. And here's, if you look here at this detail, what the system consists of is a layer of plywood sheathing, your waterproof membrane, that's usually your bituminous black membrane, but there are other membranes now, and then a roofing system on top. But so check your roof. Most likely you have a roof material that is non-combustible. So some of the other areas that you really need to check is at the roof edge detail, where you definitely should have metal gutters. And I'll show you a picture why that is important. You want to have leaf guards, or at a minimum, you want to make sure your your gutters are cleared of any debris that could be ignition places for the embers to land. And then the most important thing to look at is this metal drip edge. If you'll note that what could happen if that gutter catches on fire, that then the fire has a way to get up underneath the roofing material and it can go right into your attic. Now you've got the whole house on fire. One of the other areas to look at, and you'll note, we'll talk about the vent systems, but you notice that on the one other where you may have a wind-driven heat or radiant heat and flame coming at your house, what happens is that hits the house and curls up underneath the rafters. A good number of homes in the Santa Cruz mountain areas don't have this soffit option, which really should be a non-combustible piece of material that protects that ability of the heat to rise under the rafters and not get into your attic area. Here's a couple of examples of what not to do on the left-hand side. You can see if you haven't cleaned your gutters and all you need is a little spark and now your house is going to go up. That's what happened on the right. But what you'll see is this was a test case, and on the left-hand side, that's a plastic gutter that caught on fire. And then what happens? The gutter falls off the roof, falls down to the base of the house, and now you have a fire right there next to the siding of the house. The plastic gutters are really very dangerous. So that one of the recommendations that is beginning to come out of CAL FIRE, and that is almost, if you don't have a need for gutters, maybe you don't have them on your house. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the accumulation of the duff. And then if you follow the 5-foot non-combustible zone at the base of the house, you've got a pretty non-combustible area. So some of the other things, if you've got tile roofs, or if you have a concrete tile roof like on the left, what you have to do is be mindful to watch for the areas circled where there may be an accumulation of leaves and easily combustible material, and you need to be diligent about keeping that clean. The other areas where litter accumulates is along where we have a complex roof system, a dormer of some sort, or maybe there's a chimney that comes up and has a wall that is exposed. Very important to keep it clean, but more than anything, you'll see if on the picture on the left, if that were to catch on fire like what you're looking on the right, those wood shingles probably wouldn't last very long either. So one of the areas that you really should look at is, does stuff accumulate at the base of your wall? What you can do is a metal flashing along that area will help the material to be more easily removed. And you also ought to think about upgrading the siding in particular in those areas. There's a couple of ways to do that. Obviously non-combustible siding, but even in this type of area, we ought to think about putting a layer of 5/8 inch gypboard behind the siding, and now you have a 1 hour fire rated wall. And so that again is going to protect the house. Another area on the roof, skylights. Number one, You can see in these redwood prone areas, they like to shed. And so number one is keep the roof clean. Number two is though the acrylic dome fire skylights, what they do is tend to knock off of, have the debris fall away from them. But the downside of an acrylic dome is if you get a hot fire, radiant heat will melt the acrylic and your skylights are prone to melt. And now you've got an opening for fire to come into the house. What you should have probably is a double pane glass skylight where now you've got double protection against the radiant heat. And you'll see a little example of that with your windows as well. Most probably a good idea, especially if you're in an area where you have trees above your roof, you would want to go to the double pane skylights. Second priority with house is that all houses have air vents under eaves where we saw the detail before, usually at a gable end. You through roof vents at the ridge line of your home, whether you have a ridge line vent or just a vent in the attic, and foundation vents. So why do we worry about them so much? Well, main reason is that this is what it looks like if you have screening on their vents that is larger than a 1/4 inch or a 1/4 inch or larger. And that's what was generally used in most homes before that were built before 2008. So kind of shows you with a 20-mile-an-hour wind what a fire can generate. Here's what your attic or your crawl space might look like if you have those vents there. Here's a typical foundation vent, and you can see the spacing really actually, even now you have a stucco house, you still are exposed that the embers can get into your crawl space. So what's recommended now is a mesh size, the 3mm or 8/1/8 inch mesh. The cheapest way is to go and get some meshing and cover over your 1/4 inch vents with 1/8 inch venting. If you want to go one step further though, the new designs in the new housing codes will have venting similar to what we're taking a look at here. And the one on the left and the one in the middle, both, what the new vents have is a intumescent honeycomb mesh that you can see in there. And what happens is when the heat from the fire hits these vents, hits your home, they melt and they close up and stop anything from penetrating into the home. So they're a little more expensive than the old style vents, but it certainly would save the home. So in the long run, it makes it worthwhile. And here's what it looks like, a vent that went through a fire, and you can see what happens is that intumescent material expands and just closes it. Now, downside is the upside is your house is still there. The downside is you have to replace the vents before another fire. So those are all relatively cheap structural things to do with your house to protect it against the onslaught of embers. But Another thing to look at is your window system. And what you can see that just that plant in a pot next to the window was able to generate enough heat to crack that window. Now that window is a double pane window, and it had the Venetian blinds closed behind it. So nothing penetrated the house. But you need to check your windows to be sure that you have dual pane. Homes that were built in the 1900s, let's say, most of them didn't have the dual pane. And so what you want to do is check it. It helps obviously save energy for you on heating your home, but when a fire is approaching the home, the radiant heat will tend to crack the windows, and if that allows the fire to get in, same as we just talked about with the skylights. So your radiant heat energy will hit the outside pane, and even if it cracks, you still have the inside pane that's going to protect you. Now, one thing to remember, if you're leaving your home, even if you have a dual pane window and you're leaving your home and you have a combustible drapery on the inside, you want to leave those open. You don't want that to increase the heat load in the windows. So what should you do if you've looked at your house and you see that you have single pane? The first thing you should look at is replacing it with WUI, and that means wildland urban interface rated windows. All the window manufacturers are aware of that and that type of windows now. You want to make sure you keep plants and materials away from the windows on the outside. If you have wood framing, you want to make sure that the wood doesn't crack. If it does crack, you want to caulk it. You want to make sure that there's not a place for the embers to get into a little crack and start the wood on fire. And now you've got a chance that the fire could come around the window frames. Close all the windows before you leave during fire season. And then there is an additional protection that you could do, and that is to, much like a storm window that they use back east, a non-combustible covering to put over the window in the event that you are evacuating and you know that there's a fire coming. So some of those things should be done for windows. Decks, we all have them. Most all of us have wooden decks. And what we are finding out that this is also a big exposure area from embers landing on the deck, embers hitting the siding of the house, and then they fall down on the deck. And the number one area to worry about is that space where there's a connection to the house. What you want to definitely do is keep that area clear. There's a couple of things that are recommended. You can see where the arrow is pointing on the left. The easiest thing, or one of the cheaper things to do, is put a sheet metal flashing right there. That would be 6 inches high, 6 inches wide, and that way most embers that fall down, if they hit the siding, are going to fall on a non-combustible piece of metal and most likely will burn out. But if you're going to replace the deck, first of all, you ought to think about replacing it with a non-combustible material or a highly fire-rated material, and that would be there's materials out there, Trex and various other manufacturers that offer fire rated boards. But when you do build a new deck or replace an old deck, some of the things that are recommended now is your joist spacing should be 2 foot apart. They have a Protecto metal or butyl membrane tape that you put on top of the joists. And what this does is help keep the duff from building up in between the boards. That's a key area. And you want to keep a 1/4 inch spacing between the boards. So on the picture before, you saw that the joints were quite close together. So embers falling on the deck, we're going to fall into that crack, and that's where fires would begin to start. Now here's an example of what it can look like. One of the other recommendations is right next to the house is maybe just put 3 non-combustible type boards. That's what they've done here. You can pretty much match them in even if you have a wood deck on the outside, but they've also kept the cracks clear and spaced properly so that there's no buildup of materials. Other part of decks is not recommended that you store materials under your decks, especially if they're open areas where obviously embers are going to blow in there. You don't want to do that. Best thing to do is keep the deck areas clear of any combustible materials underneath. Even if you were to enclose this underside, you still want to make sure the underside is non-combustible materials where the man is standing. You need to make sure that leaves and twigs and things don't accumulate below your deck. Fencing. One of the worst things we've got, and it was the rage 10, 15 years ago, and that was to use the Redwood lattice it looked nice, it was cheap, and now we're really aware of how flammable it is. It's almost like balsa wood. It doesn't take much to start it up. So one of the first things you need to think about is if you've got lattice, you need to get rid of it. Second thing is the vulnerability of attaching your fencing to the house. Here's a good example of what could possibly happen. It could go the other way around, but what happened here, the house caught on fire, and then it followed the fence line right over to the garage, and now the garage is on fire. So what can you do? Well, make sure there's a break from the house to the first part of the fence, and that should be at least 5 foot. You put a metal gate and still accomplish what you were trying to do, but now the fence is not going to catch the house on fire. Here's an example I just recently saw when I was coming through Woodside. A non-combustible fencing is going to start being more prevalent, I believe. Doesn't have to be the shiny corrugated, but corrugated fencing comes in various colors. So, on the left, you can see the old wood fence, corrugated metal, good idea in fencing. And then lastly, looking at the house, looking at the siding. And, this is a big expense. People that have siding, like myself, still have the T111 plywood siding. One of these days, need to think about going to a non-combustible type of siding. Right now, if you have wood siding, what you can do is make sure, as Marco mentioned, make sure that it is well maintained, paint with paint, make sure that there are any cracks, any spaces are, you want to have them closed in. Make sure that there's not places that are receptive to embers coming at the house. But then if you can go to the non-combustible siding, you can see this is an example that they did in a test facility, and the wood shingle siding is on fire and the other side is not. That's pretty close to what you can think. Here's another example of where they tested. Now, admittedly, they had the wood shake shingles on the left-hand side here and non-combustible siding on the right. And they started a fire brand, which is just a test material, a block of wood that'll burn for an hour. And this was probably 15 minutes in, and you can see that the wood siding was on fire. If you look on the right-hand side, anywhere that there was a crack that was a space, the fire managed to get through it, and now your studs are on fire and the inside of the house is on fire. So, you know, a non-combustible fire-resistant siding is probably your best bet. Getting back to Marco mentioned earlier about mulching and fire exposure at that 5-foot area. Again, one of the things that you want to look at, where we call the space at risk there, even if you have good siding at the base where it's connected to the foundation, there's always a gap there. And you want to make sure that you have some sort of a metal drip edge angle, similar to what you had on the roof edge angle. If you look at the picture on the top right, that's what it looked like. And you can see that if you had mulch like you have, this person has on the left, right up to the house, that mulch catches on fire, then a flame goes up and now it gets underneath behind the siding. And what do you have? The next thing you got is fire inside the house. So the place, the right-hand corner, the guy got a star here. You can see non-combustible 5 foot out, 1 foot of spacing from up to the siding. We know that he has a metal drip edge there, and you can't see it, but the star is on top of a vent that meets the codes. So this is what an ideal setup, and most likely would prevent the house from catching on fire. So what to do? What should you do? Because a lot of people just don't know where am I going to start? I mean, between Marco and myself, we gave you probably 20 different places that you need to worry about. And you can't get it all done in one day. So one of the things is where to start. First of all, you need to assess your home and your landscaping. Develop a plan of action. And how can you do that? Well, you can connect with your local fire district. I know Central Fire has people that will come out and help you assess your home. Most of the fire safe councils that are in the area will help you do that. Here's a little paper that you can just use yourself to get going. And it goes over the basic things. Take a look through here. If you've done everything in the priority number 1 areas, then you move on and look at your scenarios on 2 and 3. It's a good way to get going, but it added to that, as I just said, the various fire safe councils, and you can contact them through their websites. And I've got this information that you'll see at the end of my slides. South Skyline, we developed an advisory forum, and we actually have some people that would come out and take a look at your home and help you go through this, assess your yard, assess the home, and set priorities, help you develop a plan, set a timeline. You know, I'm going to do work in the first 30 feet out from the house. I'm going to do the first 5 feet. And I'm going to do that this year, and next year I'm going to do more. And so then the real important part becomes to execute. And you can do it. Now, these are a couple of pictures of homes of the future, or homes that are going to be required very soon with the building codes. All non-combustible construction. It's the house on the left here, and you can't really see it real clear, but what they have there is, you see all the windows in the front of the house. They have on the side, if there's a fire approaching, they actually have shutters that will roll across in front of all those windows and protect the house from being exposed to any fire whatsoever. So those are the kind of things that we're gonna see more of. Here's some information that or places you can go to get a better handle on what's happening and how you can prepare not only yourself but your community on how to be preventive of wildfires. Here's some info. Here's all the local fire councils. Take a look at where you're living, and then you can find it. One of the other big things that's being promoted is the FireWise communities now. So people that live in a homeowners association, road association, you need to get together and prepare your whole community for in the event of a wildfire. So that they can help there, especially if you go to the website for the FireWise. They have individual papers on different aspects that I've just put to you. So decking, how to landscape for a fire, windows, roofing. They have specific information on each one of those. And so very good thing. And then one more thing that Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County, along with the Resource Conservation District, wanted to plug this. There's an opportunity. There's a couple in Bonnie Doon area that have done all of the work, home hardening and fuel reduction, and they're going to have an open house on July 12th. And you can register and come and tour the property. They've got even done a rooftop sprinkler system and most of the other things that we've just talked about. So an opportunity to roam around, have them explain to you how they've done it over time and what are the things that can happen. So with that, I have completed my portion, and I'm going to turn it over to John DeLong to go through our evacuation brochure. John?
Sorry about that. I was muted. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So a little bit about me. My name is John DeLong. I live right where the three counties come together, San Mateo, Santa Cruz, and Santa Clara County on Skyline Boulevard up in the top of the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm one of the founding directors of the South Skyline Fire Safe Council about 12 years ago in 2009 when we began. And I'm on the education, the chipping committee, and the home advisory committee. And wanted to point out that on the home advisory sheet that Ed had mentioned, we do offer those home advisories, but only for houses that are within our boundaries, which is from Bear Creek Road in the south to Skyline area in the north, in the Woodside, and from Waterman Gap in the west over to around Heather Heights in the east. So, but we're happy to come if you're within our area and do a home advisory for you. So, what I'm going to be talking about after Marco talked about doing your defensible space, Ed talked about hardening your home, and what I'm going to talk about is how do you prepare to evacuate if a fire does happen. Many of us have been through that already just in the last year, so we have a lot of experience about this. The Prepared Not Scared brochure that this presentation is based on, and I sent a copy of it to Chief Armstrong. So if you need one, you can contact me. I've got a link at the end where you can download it, and Chief Armstrong has a copy also. So you should be able to get it. In fact, if he might be able to post it in the chat section, maybe somebody can, if you need it, you can download it. But the Prepared Not Scared brochure was originally developed by the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County. I want to make sure that everyone knows that they're the first people who did it, and they did a great job on it. But after the August 2020 evacuations due to the CZU Lightning Complex fire, the South Skyline Fire Safe Council formed a committee to identify any lessons that we learned from the evacuation and to update the brochure for our own purposes, because we represent all three counties, and we're in kind of an outlying area for all three counties that are not really represented well by a lot of the other fire safe councils, and so we looked at it with a critical eye of what do our people need in those three counties. The committee members were Deborah Bourne, Ed Hayes, Chris Pemberton, John Drew, and myself. All the design, layout, and artwork was done by Teresa Drew, and it's a beautiful brochure. So the advanced preparations, what can you do? What actions can you take now? Way before fire season really gets rolling strong. First thing is to set up your emergency alerts. If you have not already done this, go to Santa Cruz County for www.scr911.org and sign up. It's a reverse 911 calls in case you need to be evacuated, in case there's an emergency, they will let you know. For the other counties, you can write those down if you want, but for the purpose of this audience, I am focusing just on the Santa Cruz County portion of it. Also go to zonehaven.com and sign up for Zonehaven evacuation information. Zonehaven is a software program that divides up each of the counties into various zones. And when the evacuations hit this last year, we were all evacuated by zones, and the sheriffs, the CAL FIRE, everybody gets together and they decide which zones are going to be evacuated. And so the Zonehaven website will tell you which ones are under warning, which ones are under evacuation, etc. Also, go to PG&E My Wildfire Alert in order to learn about the public safety power shutoffs. That's good information to have. Sign up for Pulse Point. It's a mobile app that tracks feeds from CAL FIRE's San Mateo, Santa Cruz CZU unit. It also tracks feeds from Santa Clara County Fire, from many other of the emergency agencies within the area. And so you can, with Pulse Point, see what's going on around you. If you use Twitter, the CAL FIRE overall is at cal._fire. The CAL FIRE CZU, which is the San Mateo Santa Cruz unit, is at CAL FIRE CZU. and then Santa Cruz Fire Dispatch at Fire Dispatch SC. And then also sign up for Facebook. For CAL FIRE's got a great website or a Facebook page that they give great information on, and they usually are quite up to date on the information that they have. Okay, additional advanced preparations. Always keep your vehicle fuel tanks a minimum of half full. It's just a smart thing to do. Create a video inventory of all your home and your possessions. Go around, take a picture of everything, and keep that on an SD card, on a flash drive, keep it in a safe, upload it to the cloud so that if your house does burn, that you have a complete inventory of all of your homes and possessions. Make copies of all your important documents, papers, insurance policies, passports, birth certificates, deeds, wills, trusts, anything that you think you might possibly need. Check your flashlights, headlamps, radios, walkie-talkies, and keep fresh batteries nearby. Learn how to shut off all of your utilities, especially the propane tanks. Purchase an ABC fire extinguisher and learn how to use it. Assemble a first aid kit. Learn how to manually open and close your garage door. In case of a power outage, there are examples of people who died in their garages because they were unable to open their garage door. And so you need to know how to manually open that garage door in order to be able to evacuate your premises. Pack your go bags for every household member, including your pets, and I'll get into detail on that in a minute. Collar, tag, and ship all of your pets, and include pet photos in the go bags. So for go bags for people, what do you put in it? Plan for a 7 to 14 day evacuation. I personally was evacuated for 9 days last August and September. But I know that many people in the Bonnie Doon and Boulder Creek area were evacuated for much, much longer than that. So 7 to 14 is probably a good starting number. Prepare a list of all your contacts and maps of the areas. Get your phones, chargers, computers, portable drives with all your documents and video inventories, and put those together. I have a very large box that I put all of this stuff into, and so I can just grab it and go real quick during fire season. Pack cash in small bills. They say that if all you have is 20s and you need to buy a bottle of water, that bottle of water is going to cost you a $20 bill if somebody doesn't have change. So pack small bills, bank cards, checks. Pack a battery-powered radio, your clothes, outdoor wear, toiletries, medications, extra glasses, extra car and house keys, jewelry and valuables, the first aid kit that you packed on that previous page, flashlights, headlamps, extra batteries that we talked about earlier, and copies of all the important documents that we talked about earlier. All that should be in your go bag. Preparing go bags for pets. Have a carrier for each pet with the pet's name and the owner's contact information clearly displayed. Have proof of evacuations, leashes, toys, sanitation bags, medication, and food for 7 to 14 days. Extra drinking water for each pet. The owner and pet ID on each pet, and photos of the pet in case of separation. What you should be wearing when you evacuate. In case of a fire, you make sure you have long sleeve clothes. Make sure it's cotton or wool. Avoid all synthetic material, because if it's synthetic, when it gets against flame or heat, it's going to melt against your skin. Don't want that. So cotton and wool are natural materials and are the best thing to have when you're around fire. N95 face mask and goggles, sturdy, heavy-soled shoes, leather work gloves, a wool cap, cotton bandana, reflective jacket or vest, headlamp with fresh batteries, and a wool or a fire retardant blanket. If you need help with large animal evacuation, here's the Santa Cruz County Equine Evacuation at www.equineevac.org. So you can contact them to have assistance with evacuating large animals. The information for San Mateo and Santa Clara County is here as well. So now the fire is getting near. You got to get ready to go. What are you going to do? You're going to assure all members of the household know about the threat. Place the fire extinguishers just inside the doors, easily visible through windows. Turn off air conditioners and ceiling fans. Fill jugs, tubs, and waters with, or fill jugs, sinks, and tubs with water. Place large towels nearby. Move flammable curtains and furniture away from the windows, but try to make sure that you keep a space so that you can travel through the rooms. Move flammable patio furniture, umbrellas, barbecues, doormats at least 30 feet away from the building. Place metal ladders against the building for roof access. This is for the firefighters if they come to fight your fire, fight a fire at your house. This gives them all the assistance that it will help them immensely. Set rakes, shovels, and clippers 10 feet away from the house for firefighters' use. Place buckets full of water outside near decks and fences. Connect outside hoses to water spigots and tanks. Do not leave sprinklers on or running. There's a lot of people who think that all they have to do is turn sprinklers on their roof and then leave. But the negative part of that is that if those sprinklers are going for half a day and it empties your water tank, by the time the firefighters get there, they're not going to have any water to be able to work on fighting the fire around your house. So don't do that. So it's time to go. What are you going to do? You stay calm. You stay together. Wear your protective clothing. Secure your pets and livestock into carriers and trailers. Load the go bags into your vehicles. Load extra water into the vehicles. Shut off your propane tank. Test your walkie-talkies and your radios. Turn on all your interior and exterior house lights. The reason for this is so that if firefighters come and it's in night, they want to be able to see your house, be able to see around it, and it helps them in fighting the fire if you still have power. Close all doors, windows, skylights, and garage doors as you leave. Do not lock the doors. The firefighters may need to shelter from the flames. This is a controversial statement, and we've gone back and forth on this quite a few times. And CAL FIRE wants you to leave your doors unlocked. The fire department does. The sheriff's department, some sheriffs had indicated that they think you should lock your door when you leave, but we think, since we're a fire safe council, that we're focusing on the fire issue. So do not lock the doors. Post a resident contact information in the front window. Our brochure actually has a panel in it that is a tear-off panel that you fill out saying where you're going, who you are, where you're going, how many people evacuated, how many animals, your cell phone numbers, and that way the fire department, if they need to get a hold of you, they have the information. You can just tape it on the inside of the front window. Confirm your escape route amongst yourselves. Know your meeting place. Know who you're going to be calling out of state for out of state contacts, so that it's best to call somebody from out of state in case all of the phone lines in state are tied up. And so you have someone out of state who can gather the information and pass it on to other family members to let them know that you're safe and where you are. Drive with your vehicle headlights on. Set your air conditioner on recirculate. Reason for that, you want to keep all of the smoke outside the car, not bring it in. So recirculate will do that. Drive slowly and defensively and stay on paved roads. So to access the full brochure, here is the link. It's southskylinefiresafe.org/links/ready for wildfire. And you will see it's called Prepared, Not Scared is the brochure. And if you need more information, you can contact me at ssfsc.treasurer@gmail.com, and I'm happy to send you a copy of it as well if you wish. So that is my presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We did have just a couple of questions come through. If we could address those really quick. I did have one pretty early on regarding kind of how this information comes available when we have these webinars and such. And I posted a little bit about that. And then I think, John, I think you just covered it well by posting a lot of the stuff where we, as far as our CAL FIRE Twitter or Facebook, and so forth, where we try to distribute news of these types of webinars. There was also one question about wood piles, as far as where do you put wood piles? And I'm going to go ahead and kick that one to Mr. Hayes, just for fun. So how do you handle firewood as far as proximity to house and so forth?
Well, firewood is combustible. So it needs to be about 30 feet from the house. That's the recommendation on that. I don't know how, Marco, you got any other ideas on that one?
So I've seen people create a little shelter shed that's made with non-combustible construction material like hardy board, something like that. But it's Ember. It needs to be Ember resistant. So one strategy is putting a non-combustible tarp over it. And so that way, if embers hit it, they would just kind of bounce off and fly away. And then the area underneath you should end up scratching it down to earth. So that way a surface fire can't work its way towards it. One idea, I've seen some locations where the wind always comes from a certain direction, and that's where the northeast winds come from, and don't put your wood pile on that side of the house so it's in alignment with your house, move it off to the side. So that's just another strategy.
Oh, go ahead, John.
I'm sorry, I was going to say my wood pile is about 30 feet from the house, but just this last year, I bought a 30-foot long non-combustible fire-resistant tarp that I put over the entire woodshed, so that the face of the woodshed, it's got a metal roof, but in case it keeps embers out from inside the where the wood is stored. So as Marco said, that's one good solution.
And John, we got a question coming through on Facebook right now as far as any suggestions for those non-combustible tarps.
I think I went to Tarps Now, I believe. I can't remember the name of the company, but just if you just do a Google search for fire resistant tarps, there's 2 or 3 companies that sell them.
Sure. And on that topic of wood piles, it's so interesting. It's a catch-22, right? In the winter, we want it as close to our house as possible. In the summer, you want it as far as possible. So I know mine's at the big piles on the other side of the property, and I keep just enough for a day or two on the porch during the winter. And it's an epic journey across to move that wood, but during the fire season, you appreciate that it's a little ways away. Right. So let's hear more about wood piles. That seems to be the major one this evening. There was a question that came through on Facebook as far as whether or not this presentation is shareable. It absolutely is. I'm not real Facebook savvy, but there should be just a share function on there. And all of these presentations that we've been doing also stay up, so you can rewatch them on Facebook and also on our YouTube channel. That's CAL FIRE CZU. And let's see if we had any other. Well, looks like you guys were sharing some of the information on the wood piles and so forth. There's also, if you guys don't, we have a few minutes left for questions. If people have any extras, I believe there's like a raise your hand feature as well that we can take people off mute and answer if need be. So we can give just a minute for that and see if anything else comes through, because we don't want to leave anybody hanging. And it doesn't look like there's really any coming through. So with that, not seeing any more questions come through on the Facebook side either. Number one, just want to thank you, all you gentlemen, very much for coming on, taking time out of your evenings to share your knowledge and information on everything. Ooh, one last question here from Angela. How should we find out how to turn off our gas line, and should we?
Yes, definitely should turn off the propane tank if a fire is approaching, and gas line and all propane. If it's propane tank, propanes have a shut-off valve right near the tank itself. It usually takes a special wrench, or I just have a crescent wrench that I've got down to the size that it needs, and it's been there for 35 years, so it's completely rusted shut to the size of the shut-off valve. But I've got it on a chain hanging right next to it, so all you do is just slip it on there and turn it off. If you have city gas or one of the gas utilities, there should be a shut-off valve near your meter, right at your gas meter. So go out, check it out, and see what it's going to take in order to be able to shut that off.
And we do advocate turning, whether you're on propane or natural gas, we all advocate turning those off if there's a fire approaching on your property or you're going to be evacuating as well.
Absolutely.
A little bit more on defensible space. Should we remove green ornamental shrubs near our house to make more defensible space?
Defensible space, what we're looking for would be remove dead and dying. And if you have something that is potentially flammable, but not easily flammable, one strategy within 30 feet of your house is that it's kind of an isolated location. So if you do have extreme conditions and it should catch fire, it can't easily extend to something else. So what we're looking for within 30 feet of your house is that you have nicely landscaped, watered, nothing is dead and dying. And if you live in an area where you're not doing the water landscaping, then you need to look at different strategies where a surface fire might extend, but it can't get out of a planter because you have it isolated and like a little fire break separating it from other areas. So we're seeing a more combustible mulch is the challenge. And that's one strategy of separating it and dividing it up. So that way it can't burn continuously across the surface.
All right, I'm going to give just one more second to see if anything else comes through, because it seems like each time I try to say good evening to you folks, we get one more come through, but it looks like that's about it for the night. So we do appreciate everybody who attended this evening, whether you've been on Facebook, on Zoom here with us, or tuning in on TV on a local channel 25. But thank you all for your cooperation, your interest in being more safe and ready for this fire season. Thank you, gentlemen, again for helping us out tonight, and we hope that everybody has a nice, safe evening in fire season. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you, Kingston.